So the heartbeat bill basically is legislation that would ban abortion once a fetal heartbeat can be detected. And that can happen as soon as early as 6 weeks into a woman's pregnancy. And for many women, that's before they even learn that they are pregnant, find out that they're pregnant. And a version of that bill has passed the Ohio House, 3 times, but has never passed the Senate. It's always stopped there because senators said that it would just be determined unconstitutional and really not worth fighting in the courts. And it might actually undo some of the abortion restrictions that the Ohio legislature has enacted in recent years. Meanwhile, the 20-week abortion ban, it basically would ban abortions after 20 weeks post-fertilization, which how most people think of pregnancy, it's really 22 weeks of gestation as measured by physicians. So it's being called a 20-week abortion ban, but it's probably closer to 22 weeks. And that bill was favored by the Ohio Senate. So each chamber kind of had their preferred. They're both controlled by Republicans, controlled by very strongly pro-life Republicans, and each chamber kind of had their own best plan that they wanted to see happen. And so what happened last week is during the negotiating that happens behind closed doors, they agreed to pass the other one's bill. So Governor John Kasich had both bills on his desk at the same time and really could have decided to sign both of them into law, which would have created some conflicts, veto one, sign the other, or he could have just let them become law without his signature, which is pretty rare in Ohio, but that's another option. And so what he ended up doing was vetoing the heartbeat language, and that was actually tucked into a unrelated bill, and it had a money appropriation in it. So he could use his line item veto power to just, erase literally lines from the bill. So he took those out for the heartbeat language. And he signed the 20-week ban. And in a statement accompanying his veto, he said that he believed that the heartbeat bill would have tied up the state in really costly litigation with a losing result. And meanwhile, the 20-week ban could have the possibility of actually pushing forward the pro-life cause, if that is challenged in court. A lot of pro-life people believe that might actually withstand a court challenge because advances in medicine might show that viability is earlier than 24, 28 weeks as previously decided by the courts. And I don't think it's an issue that's going to go away. The thing with the abortion issue is it's not one where people kind of waver. You either feel strongly one way, or the other. And public opinion is pretty divided on this issue generally. But if leadership in state houses across the country swings more conservatively, as it has been for the last couple of years, you've seen a lot of abortion restrictions in the past decade or so enacted by the states. And then the question is always, well, do they hold up to the U.S. Supreme Court decision in Roe v. Wade? And the pro-life lobbyists are always looking for ways to maybe overturn it, or at least get a win in the court that helps their cause. So I think that we'll continue to see this be an issue definitely for the next decade. As far as people who are opposed and against it, this was a kind of an interesting situation because it actually split the pro-life community. Ohio Right to Life, which is an anti-abortion group here in Ohio, the state's largest, they actually did not support the heartbeat bill because, for the same reasons that Governor Kasich listed in his veto, they felt that it would be unconstitutional and open the state up to additional challenges on other laws that they have championed in the past. And so supporting the heartbeat bill really was much more extreme faction of Ohio's pro-life community. There's a group called Faith to Action that was kind of leading the charge, and they have been very almost aggressive in their tactics. They've sent teddy bears and roses and baby onesies to lawmakers. They flooded their offices with phone calls. They even had supporters showing up on the front lawns of some of these Republican lawmakers in the Senate who, didn't want to move forward with the bill. So, their tactics have been rather strong, and they would like to take credit for the bill finally reaching Kasich's desk. However, the Senate President, Keith Faber, is really the one that decided in the end to move it forward. And, he told reporters that the election of Donald Trump, a Republican who intends to put more conservative justices on the U.S. Supreme Court, kind of, emboldened him to take the next step and move it forward. The official terms that we use in print are abortion rights and anti-abortion, and that's because abortion is the law of the land. And I was using pro-life. I tend to use pro-life in conversation simply because most people understand that at least similarly to abortion rights and anti-abortion. But when I'm writing about it, we actually don't say pro-life and pro-choice because they are loaded terms. So I'm glad that you brought that up. And yeah, on the other side, the abortion rights side of things, Planned Parenthood, NARAL, Pro-Choice Ohio were big opponents of this. The ACLU of Ohio was a big opponent of this. Actually, the other opponents, the Ohio State Medical Association, which typically does not take a position on abortion language, opposed both these bills because what they do is they create new penalties for physicians who believe that they're, doing what's in the best interest of the patient. Because even with the 20-week ban in Ohio, any abortions that happen after 20 weeks and before 24, which is the cutoff here, you need to have a medical emergency and a doctor needs to sign off on it. So it was already very rare. Only 0.7% of abortions in Ohio last year happened after the 21st week of pregnancy. So they're already very rare. And, physicians did testify at the State House to say, these are situations where the child is very much wanted. The baby is very much wanted. It's a wanted pregnancy. And there's some complication or a fetal abnormality where they believe that once the baby is born, it will die or it will suffer before it dies and not have any sort of life or quality of life. So they're not lightly taken decisions by these women, and that those decisions should be best left to the woman and her physician and her family when she's faced with a situation like that. I think a lot of that push comes from a Christian belief. I know that during the debate on these bills, several clergy from other faiths did come to the State House and say that their faith's view of abortion is not the same as the Christian faith's view of abortion, and that actually this would endanger their religious beliefs. Especially there were a few Jewish rabbis that came and said, for the Jewish faith, they don't believe that a fetus becomes a child until it takes its first breath, and until that point, it is considered to be a part of the woman, like a limb or like a body part. And so it was really interesting to hear their take on it, because it is so different from the idea that life begins with a heartbeat, which is what the heartbeat bill supporters were pushing. And that group Faith to Action that has led the charge is a faith-based group. They call themselves a pro-faith, pro-family Christian group. The supporters did do, is that they did present, some medical evidence. They had a few physicians, the Heartbeat supporters had a few physicians testify that they believe that the heartbeat is a good indicator of life. And those accounts were questioned by the other side and by other physicians who came, saying that that's not true, and that all the evidence points to viability being, after 20 weeks or even 22 weeks, that's cutting it close. And what on the 20-week bill, the anti-abortion groups will point to studies that they say show that the fetus feels pain at 22 weeks, and that's why this is called the pain capable unborn child bill. And again, those studies have, when you actually wade into what they looked at, it's not as cut and dry as at 22 weeks a fetus feels pain. One of the major studies that they point to actually, instead of it wasn't designed to demonstrate the difference between, say, 22 weeks and 23 weeks. It was actually to see what interventions hospitals took for those early, preemie babies that were born, what they would, how they would intervene and how that affected their life outcome. And that study's kind of been co-opted to show that at 22 weeks, they'll have a maybe 1 in 4 chance of surviving to toddlerhood. And so viability should be at that stage. In Columbus too, just during this whole debate, there was an article published in the Columbus Dispatch about a girl who was born at 22 weeks, and very, very slim chances to live at that point. And but she is alive now and thriving, a couple of years later. And so, several lawmakers pointed to that story and it's anecdotal but that, I think, also, helps their cause when they can point to a case that was really well known in the community of survival. But, that's with extreme medical interventions, and even viability at 28 weeks or 24 weeks. It's the baby's going to need, intense medical interventions. And will be in the NICU for months before they actually get to go home.
It's interesting that you brought this up, because I actually read the story about this the other day on Facebook, and I personally believe that abortion, no matter what the circumstances are, even if the mother is in danger, I think abortion is murder. And so I'm really glad that the Ohio House passed this bill, because I am pro-life. I always have been, and I always will be. And I believe these babies deserve a fighting chance to live. So, I think Roe versus Wade should be overturned rather. And I think abortion should be made illegal in all circumstances, because it's murder. Even the, even the late-term abortions, also known as partial birth abortions, those are illegal. Dismemberment of a baby, that's illegal. It should be, anyway. That's how I feel, and I'm gonna stick to that. I'm not gonna change my mind on that. Because I believe that every baby deserves a fighting chance to live, even if they have disabilities or whatever. There are other options out there that these women can use. They can adopt. They can not adopt, but they could put their baby up for adoption. Or they can go on contraceptives. So there are other choices.
Why should there be any restrictions? As long as it's done medically and done safely, why should there be any restrictions whatsoever? And who is going to decide which restrictions would be in play and which ones would not? As long as it's done medically safe and safe to the female, there shouldn't be any restrictions.
There should be no restrictions on abortion whatsoever. A woman should be able to have an abortion at any time until birth.
But did you know that the woman that created abortion said publicly that this is a great way to get rid of undesirables? Did you also know that she's a white supremacist? Did you also know that abortions are mainly targeted to people that are less educated? Did you know that women die? Did you know that it's not okay to murder, period? Whether it be the death penalty and or an unborn child? Because what fault does the child have that the mother spread her legs? Or that some man got with her? Killing a mother doesn't make her unraped or unincest. It just makes her the mother of a child who was murdered. Just saying.
Okay, I'll address the abortion issue again. It's very simple. If you don't like abortion, don't have one. Mind your business when it comes to other people's bodies. For you religious freaks out there, specifically the Christians, your Bible advocates abortion if the woman is thought of as a potential cheating whore. Numbers chapter 5, verses 11 through 31. Go read your Bible. God loves abortion if the woman is a cheating whore, or at least viewed as a cheating whore by a jealous husband. So yeah, if you hate abortion, don't have one. Very simple solution. And this one's directed towards the quote pro-lifers who are virulently anti-abortion and they want to meddle in other women's decisions. Until you have taken steps to adopt an unwanted child, I don't want to hear your mouth. Because at this point, it's just empty rhetoric that you're spewing. Because you obviously don't care about unwanted children. Otherwise, you'd be adopting them. And that's what I find hysterical about most, quote, pro-lifers. They don't adopt children. They just want people who don't want these children to have them. Hysterical.
The number one rule is no man should be able to open his mouth to say one word about it, one way or the other. Oops, I just broke the rule.
To those people who say there should be no restrictions, I think there should be. When the brain is developed enough, that child can feel pain. And in my opinion, getting an abortion when that child can feel pain is completely inhumane. Before there's consciousness or pain, then fine, whatever. But afterward, no.
Yeah, I have to say that once you're about 4 months along, 3 months along, you shouldn't be allowed to have an abortion because eventually the child is going to develop into a child, and then at that point, when does it become murder? Now, I don't really tell people what to do with their bodies because I don't care. It really matters very little to me.
Here's my attitude on this. Caveat emptor, because I'm not only a man, which makes me a non-viable communicator on the topic. I'm also an adoptee who would have been the product of such a activity had the mother had the opportunity, and perhaps she deserved the opportunity. It was 1970, and instead she was shipped off to a different town without family and all the rest of it. Kind of horrible, actually. Since I've been old enough to reflect on that, I've thought that. So I kind of go along with Darla. Scientifically, we can prove when the child can feel pain, and that's when the fetus can feel pain. That's when it should stop. The other thing is, I think a lot of people on both sides of the debate have never taken a life of something even simple. When they've had to euthanize a pet. I did this to a friend's older bird once because he couldn't do it. I used helium gas, actually, which kind of is a way to quickly get high and die. Or whether you cook something as simple as some seafood like a crab or some clams or something, you're still taking a life. And I'm not going to lie, I enjoy seafood and all that, but I pause and reflect when I'm doing something like that. It makes you really ponder. So then the question is, when is it alive? And then when is it a human? I think those are two different questions. If it's alive, but it's not yet human, then it seems that you have the right to terminate, but that it should be done humanely to both the mother and the fetus. Not using something that would cause the fetus to have a chemical reaction and respond to toxicity and spaz and die, or some kind of vacuum situation or any of that. Certainly there's a lot of ways to humanely euthanize. Seems like if you gave the mom enough of some kind of opiate where she would just sort of go into la la land, that would probably do the trick. I'm not the expert, but it seems that we do that with other life forms, don't we? I mean, if you bring home a crab from the store, it naturally feels something. You could be told till you're blue in the face when you bring home some oysters that they don't feel anything, they're mollusks, but you're going to boil them, turn them into oyster stew. You're probably going to take the steps to make sure it's as quick as possible, and, that kind of thing. So it seems like it's a warranted maneuver, and I know that both sides of the aisle hate it when you mention this, because on one side, I think it cheapens their argument about life, and on the other, what's the term the young kids use, mansplaining or something of that nature. I don't know. I don't see a fetus as a rapist or a parasite. I don't think those are viable or useful descriptors. I know that that's popular jargon for them. But if the mother wishes to be rid of it, then she should be. If the person who doesn't want her to be rid of it, or doesn't want it to die, really thinks that way, they do have a couple of options. Invest all the money that goes to protests into the technology known as an artificial womb. Get that worked out. But something of note that neither side really talks about, the so-called pro-life argument, the people on that side never talk about the incredible high number of spontaneous abortions that happen before women ever know that it happened. Unless they feel sick, cramps, and the other sorts of things. And the many more that happen due to the fact that the mother wasn't given adequate care, prenatal care. Or perhaps exposed to some chemicals or something. Where are the allegedly pro-life people on those types of issues? Are they supporting prenatal care for these people? Or a low-stress environment, or some other factors that people consider who have been with a partner who is pregnant? All factors that people who have a partner who's pregnant consider. It's been a while for me. My daughter's 22 now. Those are all factors that you cannot help but consider if you are considering the mother and the offspring. And here's the other question. Does it really matter? Is who carries it? if it's in an egg, if you will, or in a artificial womb, in some sort of external environment, isn't that just as good as the mother? Perhaps better, because a womb is kind of a hostile environment. As any adoptee like myself can tell you, it's not the person who gave birth that's the mother, it's the person who raised you. So this sort of treatment on that topic, I think both sides are missing quite a bit. But I would definitely say that the alleged pro-life side has some rather daylight-inspiring gaping holes in the argument there. They would defer to the mother's personal responsibility if you mention things like, then you need to sponsor prenatal care and other types of things for the benefit of the fetus, if you believe that that fetus is viable and needs a life. And yet they would not if they really believed that. They would say, oh yes, of course, just like we need to make these laws to protect it from being terminated, then yes, we must provide this care. That's what they would do if they really believed that stuff. Do they really believe it? Is a pretty interesting question.
Okay, well, I'm pro-choice. I'm pro-choice for two reasons. One, I don't care what people do with their bodies. It's their bodies. But two, from a societal standpoint, I'm sorry, but abortion is absolutely necessary. There was someone who said that it doesn't matter what the circumstances are, if they're a product of, so incest, rape, the endangerment of the mother. Okay, I would argue this. One, if there is adoption, I agree with a poster on here, I don't know what his name is, has to do with God. I find that ironic because I feel like he's an avid atheist. Yes, if you're not willing to adopt these children, you really have no say in the matter when it comes to using that as a reason, because let's be real, there are many children out there waiting in orphanages to be adopted. Now, some orphanages take care of these kids, but some orphanages do not. This is a fact we all know. And not to mention how, like, the child has to grow up, like, feeling this way. I would also say that from an incest point of view, now, we know that when endogamous families, which means families who either marry within each other, within themselves, or, just simply have sex with them, when it's like immediate relations, brother to sister, father to daughter, mother to son, things like that, that could cause genetic problems in the child. If the child grows up, he or she will go out and populate, which means that now and this is going to make me sound like a eugenicist, you would have damaged the gene pool of the rest of society. And from a, societal standpoint, that's endangering society. It's just as dangerous as murder or theft, anything like that. Endangerment of the mother. Now, here's the thing I don't understand. Pro-life people say that the baby should live no matter what, regardless of the mother's, danger level. But if you're pro-life, how are you going to rationalize the mother dying and the child living, and not rationalize the unborn child living and the unborn child dying and the mother living? It doesn't sit right either way. I also feel like if the state wants to legislate no abortions, then I feel like, and some people might find this drastic, but if a bunch of conservatives are taxpayers and they're pro-life, that we take the baby out of the mother. Here's your pro-life solution. You take the baby out of the mother, you give her the abortion. Sometimes their babies do survive it, if it's, done late enough. You put that child in an incubator, and you send that child, after it's been developed, to be raised by the state. Since conservative taxpayers want to legislate what women can and cannot do with their bodies, they should have to take care of it. That's my view on it. I don't know if there should be complete restrictions on it. I feel like after a certain point, you are killing the baby. But I won't argue that you shouldn't kill them if they develop a brain, because this is going to make me sound horrible again. Animals feel pain. We kill them all the time. There's no difference. It's not intelligent. It's, not to mention, until that baby is out of the womb, it's not even a citizen. That's the rule. That's the law. I mean, that's how it has to be. So, I would just say that, unless taxpayers are willing to support children being raised by the state, they can't, they have to stay out of it. And that's basically my take on it.